My name is Dakota. At 34, I lost my husband in a work accident. It was a normal morning. Mark walked out the door like every other day and never came back. His death left a void nothing could fill, not just in my heart, but in the life of our 7-year-old son, Tommy. For the past 8 months, I've walked through a fog of pain and responsibility. Every day has been a battle not to fall apart, to be a mother, the financial provider, and to rebuild myself from the ashes. I still had a job, a house, and fortunately my in-laws, Sarah and Jim, who never once turned their backs. They didn't just support me. They loved Tommy like their own, with no conditions. No thanks needed. In stark contrast was my birth family. My parents always saw me as a burden. My mother adored my sister Rachel so much that her children were celebrated, while my son was pushed to the sidelines. The last straw was that Christmas, my mother said no kids were allowed, yet held Rachel's kids in her arms, while Tommy was excluded. In that moment, I realized silence is complicity. And I couldn't stay silent any longer. I had sent money, tried to please them, endured in hopes of connection, but all I got was coldness and exploitation. I ended it all. No more money, no more contact, no more bending over. Because family is who stays when you're at your lowest, who puts a hand on your shoulder and says, "Lean on me." Mark is gone, but the love he left, through Sarah, Jim, and my son, is enough to keep me standing. And I learned one thing. A brave woman isn't the one who endures the most. It's the one who dares to say, "Enough." After Mark died, I didn't think I'd make it. The pain was too big, the weight of life too heavy. I lost my husband and had to become the sole support for our 7-year-old son, Tommy. In the early days after the funeral, I didn't eat, didn't sleep, just existed. If it weren't for Sarah and Jim, my in-laws, I might have collapsed. They weren't just Mark's parents. They became the pillar for both me and my son during the darkest time. Every day they came on time, took Tommy to school, took him out, cared for him like they were born to do it. No demands, no complaints. They did it out of love. I remember one morning Sarah quietly placed an envelope in my bag. Inside was money. I gave it back, saying I didn't need it. She simply looked at me and said, "It's not because you need it, it's because we're family." I had a stable job. Mark's insurance covered the essentials. But their help was never about money. It was about presence, about unconditional care, something I never received from my own blood family. While blood relatives turned away, it was Sarah and Jim who lifted me from the abyss. And I understood. Some people don't need to share your blood to be your real family. I was never seen as the right kind of daughter in my mother's eyes. Since I was little, favoritism was obvious in every glance, every word. My sister Rachel was the pride, while I was just a shadow beside her. Even when I lost my husband, even when I was raising a child alone, my mother showed no sympathy. Instead, she used her coldness to underline that I was never good enough. My son Tommy is bright and curious. He asks questions any child might. Why does this clock tick? How does it work, Grandma? Instead of patience or affection, my mother responded with sighs and annoyed looks. Dakota, can't you teach him to be quiet? Rachel's kids are never this annoying. I swallowed my pride for years, hoping that if I endured long enough they'd see my worth. But that never happened. To them, I was a failure. A widow with a noisy kid and a less than perfect life. I used to try to be accepted. Not anymore. No one has the right to make my son feel less than. No one gets to define my worth. Not even the woman who gave birth to me. That evening, I came to the family dinner with my usual tolerance. Rachel was already there, still the ideal daughter in my mother's eyes. Her 3 kids silently glued to screens. As usual, my son and I were just a quiet presence in a staged family portrait. Just as we sat down, Rachel spoke up like she had rehearsed. "Living expenses are too high these days. I think you should help Mom and Dad each month. I'll send $500 and you only have 1 kid and a good job. Sending $1,000 isn't too hard." I was stunned. My husband's death seemed to have vanished from their minds. The months I struggled alone, raising a child in grief, not worth mentioning. I hadn't even responded before my mother cut in, cold and firm. "Send the money, Dakota. The future can wait." The future can wait? How can a mother say that when her grandchild needs to be raised, protected, and prepared for a long life ahead? I sent the money. Not because I believed they deserved it, but because I still hoped. Hoped I could mend a torn connection. But I realized later that money didn't buy love. It only bought more silence, more coldness, more shamelessness. And I understood when someone uses family as a bargaining chip, they were never family to begin with. I sent the money. Even though my heart said no, even though my soul screamed it was wrong, I sent it. Every month, $1,000 left my account like a price to keep something called family. It wasn't money I lacked. It was acknowledgement, a single kind word from the people who birthed me. I hoped, naively, that quiet sacrifice could close the lifelong gap. But all I received was silence. Calls unanswered, messages ignored. And when I needed help, a sudden meeting, Tommy got sick, Sarah and Jim were unavailable. I called my birth mother. The result was always the same. I'm busy. Rachel can't. Always a reason to say no. Always something more important than me and my child. That indifference wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. They took my money and felt no obligation, no love, no responsibility, no gestures of real family. That's when I saw the truth. I wasn't just being used. I was trading my self-respect for something that didn't exist. Love from my own blood. Endurance didn't make them love me. It just made them disrespect me longer. And I decided I would not let my son grow up in this same cruel cycle. I would be the one to break it. That Christmas, my mother called with clear instructions. This party is for adults only. Don't bring Tommy. I nodded, heavy-hearted. Tommy was excited for Christmas, and I had to hide from him one truth. He wasn't welcome in his mother's own family. I left him with Sarah and Jim, the people who always loved him without question, and drove to my mother's house. But the moment I walked in, I froze. Rachel's 3 kids were running around, laughing, toys scattered everywhere. There was no adults-only party. There was only one truth. My son was the only child excluded. I looked at my mother, then Rachel, betrayal tightening my throat. I stepped into the center of the room, voice calm but firm. You told me not to bring Tommy because this was a child-free party. But Rachel's kids are here? Why is my son always the one left out? The room fell silent. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. No one answered. And I understood. To them, Tommy was never part of this family. No more insults were needed. Their actions said everything. That night I left. Not just the party, but the lifetime of a toxic relationship. Because no one, not even my own mother, has the right to make my child feel unworthy of love. That Christmas night wasn't just a moment of pain. It was a moment of awakening. As I stood in that room lit by fairy lights, watching my mother and sister avoid my gaze, I knew it was time to save myself and my son. I lifted my head, no longer afraid. I tried. I endured. I sent money, hoping to hold on to some shred of family. But tonight, when you told me not to bring Tommy because this was an adults-only party, then let Rachel's kids run around freely, you gave me my answer. Tommy and I have never been part of this family. No one said a word, but I didn't need an excuse anymore. I looked my mother in the eyes and said, "From today, I won't send another dollar. I won't come back. You can keep this house, this so-called family. But I will keep the most precious thing you never valued, my self-respect and my son." I walked out without looking back. It wasn't an impulse. It was the clearest decision I've ever made. Because I'd learned, blood doesn't make a family. Love, respect, and kindness do. I choose my son, and I choose myself. I used to believe family was irreplaceable, that it was blood, the place you always return to. But life and my own relatives taught me otherwise. Not everyone who gives you life will love you. After Mark died, I was lost, broken, and desperate for a foundation. Naively, I returned to my childhood home, hoping for warmth. What I got was coldness, mockery, and discrimination, not just toward me, but worse, toward my son. They didn't just ignore Tommy's presence. They made him feel like a burden no one wanted. In contrast, Sarah and Jim, my in-laws, didn't need blood to love. They picked Tommy up every day, stood by me in the darkest times, without judgment or demands. They didn't use money to control. They used their hearts to protect. And I understood. Family isn't who gave you life. It's who chooses to stay when you're weakest, who loves your child like their own, who shows up without an invitation, stays without a reason. I said enough, not just to end a toxic relationship, but to make way for the life my son and I deserve. It wasn't abandonment. It was self-rescue, and nothing is braver than that.